Hello, everyone who's here and anyone who may be watching in the future. I believe it's going to be uploaded to YouTube. My name is Dirk. I work at the Parachain Oak Network. I am also one of the mentors and one of the judges for the EU Hackathon. I've also worked for the NA Hackathon and the Asian Hackathon last year, so I'm pretty involved in a lot of the hackathons. Today, I'm going to be talking a little bit about Parachain Governance and its importance for projects. I'm going to cover a variety of different kind of topics that are semi-related to governance. And the idea is to kind of give you a bit of information that you can use to influence and help your projects, and also to just give you a good understanding about how you can learn more about the ecosystem when it comes to governance, especially from the perspective of a parachain. I've got a few different kind of things I'm going to cover today. So I'll do a bit of an introduction about myself and my experience. I'll talk a little bit about Oak Network, which is the parachain that I work for. I will also do a bit of a breakdown of traditional governance and then compare it to decentralized governance. And then I'll talk a little bit about treasuries, bounties, and tips, which for you guys as hackathon participants, I think will be especially relevant. But yeah, I'm going to try to jump across a few different topics, and then I'll leave a lot of time for questions at the end for anyone who's left over that would like to learn anything more, in case there's anything specific you guys would really ask. I realize there's a pretty significant diversity of the people in the teams on the hackathons, so I've tried to remove anything that's relatively technical so it's accessible to kind of everyone. If you have deeper technical questions that you'd like to be answered about how the governance palettes or democracy palette works, feel free to reach out to me afterwards and I can kind of send you some resources, or we could even jump on a 1v1 call or something like that. Just for a little introduction, this workshop will probably cover two kind of core learning objectives. The first one is to give you an introduction to Polkadot and Parachain Governance. Essentially, I'm going to explain some of the mechanisms that make up the governance system and explain kind of why they're important and how it kind of differs from potentially other systems. And then secondly, I'm going to try to create some understanding of how the governance system may be used to leverage for your future projects. So I think if you guys are, I think that could be really useful for a lot of the hackathon teams. So make sure you stay towards the end, or if you're watching on YouTube, there might be some chapters and feel free to skip ahead. So firstly, about me. Like I said, I work at the Parachain Oak Network. My role is currently the head of research and education. Fun little fact, I was actually promoted today to that role. I used to be a research specialist, so it's quite exciting for me. This is the first workshop that I have been doing in my new role. So yeah, hopefully it all goes good. Outside of that, I am also the Polkadot head ambassador for the Australia and the New Zealand region. And I'm pretty active in a lot of the other kind of ecosystem. I'm also part of the 1,000 Contributors Club in Polkadot, and I've been involved in a lot of different kind of Polkadot related to projects. I'm also a governance council member for the Touring Parachain, which is Oak Network's Kusama Parachain. I'm also a council member on Cross Shadow and a runner-up on the Kala Network, and I'm very active on Kusama Governance. If you're unsure what a governance council member is or does, don't worry about it. I will explain a little bit about that in the future. But essentially, the idea is that I try to be involved as much as the democratic kind of decision making that is involved in the ecosystem as possible. A little bit about me. My background before I started working in blockchain was actually in the esports industry. I worked for one of the gaming teams here in Australia, if you can understand my accent, which is pretty cool. I used to work at Riot Games on the esports team when League of Legends was pretty big in about 2016, I think. And so hopefully there's some fans of the gaming world. People often ask me what it's like kind of transitioning from this online gaming sphere to the decentralized like Web3 career. And there's a lot of kind of similarities. A lot of there's a lot of similarity feels. It's kind of like the wild, wild west. And it's good because there's a lot of like tech heavy people. And yeah, so if you're interested in League of Legends, feel free to follow me on Twitter and send me a message or something. I also have a PhD in business information systems. My topic is dynamics and key influences of fintech entrepreneurial ecosystems. I put it here in pink to make it sound more exciting because it's actually pretty boring. But one of the topics that I cover pretty significantly is traditional governance and on-chain governance and the mechanisms how it shapes different emerging technologies. Yeah, if you're an academic, feel free to read any of my published papers. But you guys probably aren't interested in that. It's pretty boring. All right, so next I'm going to talk a little bit about Oak Network. Oak Network is the parachain that I work for. We are an automation parachain. The best way to describe it, I think, is think of our blockchain as another chain that you can schedule future events or transactions on. So something like, for an example, is we do a lot of auto compounding. So another parachain can use their staking kind of method, and then they can take those rewards schedule a future transaction on our chain, and then automatically compound them back into their staking pool. The same is kind of applicable for liquidity pools or anything like that. We have a bunch of different kind of features that we're working on, but the idea is to try to automate as many transactions within the Polkadot ecosystem as possible to create just to create a level of convenience for the users, but also to create a greater level of safety and security. So we work on a bunch of different things. We have a Turing parachain, which is our Kusama parachain, and the Oak parachain, which is just about to be launched. Yeah, if you have more questions about Oak, always there's lots of resources you can learn. You can check out to learn more about us. Here's a few of the core features that we're working on. So we have a DEX integration and price triggers, recurring actions, dollar cost averaging, smart contract triggers and actions. So a lot of these are kind of features that a lot of people would be really used to, especially if you come from a traditional finance background. But the idea is that a lot of everything that we do is completely decentralized, non-custodial, and really bringing that Web3 kind of functionality to the Web 2 functionality to the Web 3 is the way I often describe it. So now to the fun stuff. This is a question that I ask pretty regularly when I do these types of workshops. I'm not sure if anyone here has been to any of my prior workshops, and if you would be, I probably would have asked this question as well. But what is governance? And from your perspective, what does governance look like? Governance is one of those things that kind of comes up a lot, and it's one of those things that I see people really struggle to kind of define it exactly for. That's like one of those things where they know that it's around and they've been around it, but they can't describe it very well. That's because it often changes depending on the organization or the current setting that you're really looking at. And the traditional governance often differs quite far from blockchain governance, but we have a lot of kind of different things that are kind of jumbling together. And I think the best place to kind of start for getting an understanding of what governance really is that governance are the rules, the policies, the procedures, the processes, the kind of structure that you apply to your organization. And this applies to any type of organization, small scale organizations, large scale organizations. Large organizations like Apple, Google will have governance standards and governance policies for how they implement their rules, policies, and procedures, and essentially how they target and handle change within their organization and within the setting that they operate in. But this is still the same for small businesses or even like small shops or sports clubs or people that really don't manage many people. They may not have a traditional governance plan, but governance still significantly affects their organization because it takes in how that they handle change. So why is governance important? Because the governance is really the structure for how you define how your organization or your team or your company will handle change and how it will grow and evolve within the future. In a traditional organization, governance is generally implemented from the top down. So your leadership team has like goals and information which they send through, and that impacts things like how hiring is handled or how much pay is given out or who will get bonuses this year. All of those types of things are kind of defined by the structure and the rules from the governance system that's been implemented from the top. Obviously, in a decentralized network, we lack that top-down type of leadership because of the ability to remove the centralized points, which a leadership team is always going to be. So as you might learn in a little bit, is that creates a little bit of friction because it's much harder to convince everyone to grow for the good of the network when you just have like a spokesperson. But it also creates these interesting kind of opportunities, and especially for small scale projects like you guys may be working on right now, the governance system really introduces a lot of opportunity. So there's a variety of different reasons why governance is important, but essentially it enables how your organization can change and grow. And in an innovative space like blockchain, that's going to be really, really important. So we'll cover a little bit of that in the future. So I've got a little slide here. So how the governance system is how an organization changes and grows. So this can be through a variety of different ways, but the best way to think about it is how is the rules and guidance that is shaping your organization, how is that kind of being implemented? So decentralized governance. So obviously when we go used to traditional governance where we can have CEOs and boards and leadership teams, when we don't have that, we have to come up with new solutions. And the solution that Polkadot has come up with for how Parachain and Polkadot Governance works within their ecosystem is, in my opinion, one of the strongest assets that is currently driving Polkadot forward. And I think in the future, if we see Polkadot reach that kind of climactic forefront of layer ones and layer zeros, I think a lot of that will be through the attractiveness of the governance system, because if you talk to a lot of new developers, that's really one of the bigger benefits. So I'm going to kind of describe a few of the makings of that now. So how Polkadot uses on-chain governance. Polkadot has actually invented quite a lot of very, very interesting mechanisms for implementing their on-chain governance. So the on-chain governance is kind of handled by a few different core features and functions, which I'll go through just here. So you have proposals, referenda, voting, and treasury. So proposals, referenda, and voting kind of work together. I'm not sure if you can see this that well, but this is the timeline of how a change or an idea from the community or from an individual can be implemented as a proposal, which then goes through the referenda process and then is voted on by the community and is then enacted as an on-chain change. So as you can see, an initial person, any token holder can submit a pre-image and receive a hash, and then you can submit that hash. So the hash can include any types of system changes, payouts of the treasury. There's a whole variety of different types of actions that the governance palette can handle, but the process for all of those is the same. For anyone that has experience with Polkadot governance, you may recognize that this is what's considered the old style of governance. Currently, Polkadot and Kusama, currently Kusama is using what's called Governance 2.0 or Open Governance, it's often called as well, which introduces some new features. And Polkadot is still using the original governance, and the original governance is also what is currently being used by almost, I'd say, 99% of the parachains. So all of the parachains and Polkadot uses this same system where an individual can submit a proposal. Then all of the proposals are voted on by all the users. The proposal which receives the most support within that period becomes a referenda. The referenda is then voted on by each individual or everyone who is interested in it. And if it reaches a certain pinnacle or a threshold, then the vote is enacted. So this gives a way for the server or the solution and the system to be upgraded and to create change in a fully decentralized way. So again, you're shaping the future of your organization, but this is using a manner which means that every single person can have an influence over their system. It's obviously not perfect. And if you're a fan of political history or democracy, you'll know that no democratic system is without problems. And I may cover some of the problems in the future, but the idea is that in a traditional governance system, as a user or as a customer, you have very, very little influence within that product. Essentially, all of your influence comes down to your ability to purchase or not purchase the product. At least within these new decentralized systems and governance systems, especially on Polkadot, we're starting to see more individuals and at least each user being able to help shape the future of their organization, which I think for the Polkadot ecosystem is going to be a really critical part of what's going on to really get us to the new future. So I'm going to go through a couple of the key features. So the first one I'm really interested in is called adaptive quorum biasing. So traditionally in a democratic system, you have everyone vote and whoever receives the more votes is the winner. Or if it's a yes, then it is enacted. And if it's a no, then it's not enacted. Adaptive quorum biasing kind of addresses the problem, one of the key problems with any democratic system of voter turnout. It can be very difficult to get people to come and vote for whatever you're interested in. And that is especially true on-chain. The majority of proposals that go through the governance systems on a lot of the parachains on Kusamas, the percentage turnout of how many people that are holding those tokens that are interested in voting on governance is very, very low. understandable. Not everyone's like a political history nerd like I am, but it also is something fun. So adaptive quorum biasing means that the difference between how many people are voting and how many people and depending on the track of where the proposal came from, means that a different amount of people are required for a yes vote versus a no vote. So there's a complex mathematical equation that actually works this out. But the idea is that by introducing a lot of these new kind of features, we help shape the governance system within Polkadot to be much more fairer, to really support having more people kind of come in and to use the system, which is really going to be one of the key differentiators between Polkadot and other layer 0 and layer 1 ecosystems. So for your projects, I think it's a really great understanding to know that you can utilize adaptive quorum biasing as well, because if you're going to be using the architecture and infrastructure of any Parachain or a Polkadot, these features are available for all of them. The next one I want to talk about is conviction voting. So when you vote for a proposal or for a referenda, you must lock your tokens in support. That's how you show how much you want to support the proposal. But if you believe in a proposal significantly, instead of having the standard lock period, you can double or triple or quadruple or even up to 6 times, I believe, lock your tokens. And that way your vote will count double, triple, quadruple, etc. for the weight of your vote. So this means that if you believe much more strongly in a proposal, that you can influence it even greater. This creates this is a great mechanism because it creates less of a problem of people who have far too many tokens being able to influence the system within with too much threshold. So obviously this is not a perfect solution, and there's problems with it, but by introducing these types of mechanisms like conviction voting, like adaptive quorum biasing, we're really in the forefront of making this on-chain governance for how projects really emerge and how they grow within the future. There's also open governance. Open governance is new to Kusama, and the best way to describe it is dynamic governance. So as opposed to having just one referenda at a time that is being voted on, depending on the origin track of proposals, then there can be multiple different timelines of executing different referenda. I probably won't go too deep into this because a lot of the parachains are not actually using open governance or governance 2.0 right now. They will likely utilize both a combination of governance 2.0 features and original governance features, such as the technical committees and the governance councils. But as you can see, that governance is something that Polkadot really values, and they put a lot of effort into really making sure that it's at the forefront of their development. Here's a picture of Gavin. I'm sure you guys all know Gavin Wood, and you can listen to him talk about open governance, governance 2.0. Clearly something he's very passionate about. And again, I think that's something that really separates Polkadot from a lot of these other ecosystems. What is the technical committee and the governance councils? So the technical committee and governance councils are 2 off-chain bodies. Well, technically they're on-chain. Yeah, they're two bodies which help guide the referendum and proposal process. So the technical committee can fast-track proposals. This is usually done for emergency proposals, and the governance council can submit proposals from another track so that they can be enacted with a lesser turnout, and they can also suggest a variety of different proposals. Just essentially, the idea is that this is used for the good of the protocol. So these are kind of interesting topics because open governance removes the technical committee and the governance councils, but the governance councils are currently really used to they're really used at the early stages. So if you are really interested in a certain parachain, I definitely recommend checking out their information on their chain, because they may be doing elections for the governance council, and it's just a really great way for you to get involved with the project. Governance in your projects. Okay, now the more exciting stuff, or at least for you guys, I think will be a little bit more relevant. I'm going to talk a little bit about how you can kind of think about your governance and why governance is a good kind of thing to have in your forefront when you're thinking about your projects. I know you're relatively deep into your projects already, so I'm not going to tell you to change everything, but this can be potentially something that you can take 1 or 2 lessons from and have one core piece of advice at the end that I think will be very useful for you guys. So One of the biggest benefits of having some form of governance plan for how essentially your team will handle change, or some way of describing kind of what you guys are doing, is to really demonstrate the structure of your team. And this is by having some forms of rules and regulations or plans or planning documents, or really anything that describes how your team is going to work and how you're going to handle things within the future. And the best way, in my opinion, about how you can really do this, which can have a great impact on your project and your hackathon and moving forward if you guys expand your projects further, is through record keeping and documentation. By keeping clean and clear records that everyone has access to, and by having that documentation, you position yourself to handle problems and to handle change across your team so much more easier. There is a variety of different things that can happen to you working on a project. I've been involved in a lot of hackathons, and I've seen so many strange things happen that teams could not plan for. But if you have some form of understanding of how you will pivot and how you will change these types of things and what you've done before, you will position yourself to be in just a much better position. So I recommend making sure that you have some planning for how you undertake your record keeping and your documentation, whether it's a weekly check-in, whether it's saving all the documents that you have together and doing some form of iterative review, like an agile process review or some form of understanding, but making sure that you have documentation that explains why you did this. And if this happens again in the future, what you will do then, you will be at a huge advantage compared to everyone else that you're really working with. Here's another great tip. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm pretty sure that I'm one of the judges for the hackathon, and I've judged the North American Hackathon last year and one of the other hackathons. I've been involved in lots of these projects. And I'm telling you this right now, that understanding the relevance of governance for your project will 100% improve your evaluation from the judges for this hackathon and for anything that you work on in the future. A lot of the people that are working on the judging team come from other parachains, and not everyone there is technical. So a lot of the experience is going to be really varied, but everyone that works for a parachain is going to have a lot of experience working with their governance system because it's so integral to the delivery of their operations. So if you can show that you have an understanding of how your project fits within their governance system and how your planning and processes handles that as well, I can guarantee you that the judges will look well upon that, because that's something that we all have to deal with all the time. And it really demonstrates that you have an understanding of the practical kind of implementation difficulties and the feasibility of this kind of ecosystem. So I highly recommend making sure that you put a lot of effort into making sure that documentation, the keeping records is really well put together. Even if you just come from a purely technical team and your team is really focused on a really great technical innovation or a really great technical solution, make sure that you have these kind of understanding of the relevance of governance for your project and the relevance of well-kept records and documentation, because that will set you apart from a lot of the other teams. So that's a little bit of advice for everyone here. Understanding governance can also be really useful because it helps with your integration with parachains and projects. As a hackathon participant, your really holy grail is going to be a lot of integration with parachains. A lot of the bounties that have been put together for this hackathon come from a lot of the parachains. So you already have this good kind of understanding of what the parachains are really looking at, but by understanding their governance system and how it works, your ability to integrate with them is going to just be so much easier. A lot of the information that kind of sits there of how to integrate with these parachains, it all belongs to the governance system, and there's no form of like review. You just use the governance system like anyone else. So by having that kind of understanding of their parachain governance system, you have such a better leg up than everyone else. So I highly recommend making sure you understand that the type of structure and differences between the different parachain projects and their governance palettes. Put a warning slide here, because I think the next thing I'm going to talk about is by far the most useful thing for all of you guys. And if you haven't listened to any of the rest of my talk, this is when you should listen, because it's really important. Therefore, I've put some warning pictures here. The most important thing for you guys right now, in my opinion, is to understand how the parachain treasuries work and the potential for you guys to use them. All of the parachains have treasuries available. A lot of the tokens that they use when they burn, so any unsuccessful proposals, a certain percentage of each of the transactions, all goes to their treasury to be spent. And if it's not spent over a certain period, then those tokens are burnt and they're gone forever. So the parachains are all incentivized to be paying out treasuries. This is like in the form of bounties, tips, and just general payouts. And grants as well, right? So if you guys are working on a project, you should be looking at every single parachain to understand if there's an opportunity to integrate with them, and if there is, then you should be looking at all those bounties. That's a really great way to excel like your project and your product from where it is now to afterwards, because every single one of these products, every single one of these parachains has these funds available for integrations, and that's a great opportunity for you there. And it's not just looking at their current open grants. Each of the governance system has the ability to request bounties and tips. So if you have a great idea, you can use the on-chain process to apply for a potential tip, or to be like, hey, here's something that I've made. Are you guys interested in that? With over 40 parachains now, that's so many different avenues to potentially get funding for your project without ever having to kind of interact with a VC, without having to do all these extra kind of things that are generally useful. You can completely on-chain score funding for your project from a variety of different parachains. And with such versatility and diversity of parachains, there's really just a great opportunity to kind of get out there and to use those funds. And if you're going to be an integration, if you can kind of create like a staking dashboard, right, or some form of dashboard that works well for one parachain, you can easily take that information, redistribute the tech, and make it work for another parachain. And then you've got another bounty, right? And there's nothing that stops you from getting those funding from all the different parachains. So this is a really, really, really good opportunity for smaller projects to secure some type of legitimate funding and really scale that up by getting these types of users. And this type of relationship is actually really kind of what the Polkadot team really wants to kind of see what happen. They want to use the level 0 Polkadot to kind of secure the security and kind of putting everything together. But from an actual user perspective, a lot of that should actually be coming through the parachains. So if you're building on top of the parachain and the parachains on top of Polkadot and everyone's kind of working together, you're really kind of helping Polkadot come to fruition, the original goal of it. So if you're a smaller level project and you want to try to secure some type of funding, the treasuries of the parachain is something that you'd really need to be looking at. Do you have an example of a person who really uses, sorry, I can't really see that. Let me see. Who really uses it to the extreme? I know there's a few people that take down a lot of the education bounties. So they create like, I believe they're like educational graphics and animations and stuff. And they just go around kind of like writing different stuff and making little videos and then putting in for a tip and getting paid pretty well. So it's a pretty legitimate like way to kind of to create like interest for your project and to secure some type of funding. Because like I said, there's a lot of money available in those treasuries. All right, next bit. So how can you learn more? I've put this great Shia slide in. Like many things, you really just need to start playing around. Get some tokens for a parachain that you like. I might have moved off the podium. Sorry about that. So yeah, as I was saying, that how can I learn more? Well, the best thing, like many things, you really need to just get involved. Get some tokens for a parachain that you like. There's a lot of faucets available if you don't want to pay for anything, or you can just buy like $10 worth and put a proposal on their chain. Vote on other referenda. Get an understanding of how the system works and mess around. A lot of these kind of systems are still very new, so a lot of them lack kind of the documentation, especially if you're going to be looking at some of the smaller parachains. But the idea is that by interacting with the other users and getting involved in it, you're going to learn so much more. So I highly recommend just playing around with it. There's lots of documentation out there, but go to the Discord servers, jump on those Parachain's Discord and kind of get an understanding of what they want, and then suggest an idea. If you think that if you can spot a need for them, that's a great opportunity to use the governance system to request funding to build something. And I highly recommend it. I've got some useful resources here for documentation. I'll likely share my slides afterwards. So if you're looking through the slides, you can have a click of these. And thank you. Yeah, that's really all I wanted to go for. I hope it was at least a little bit useful. I'm going to be around to answer any questions. And my Twitter is on the screen here at Polkadot. And I'll put my email in the chat. So you're always welcome to send me an email. I love chatting to anyone. So if you have any other types of questions about governance or even just about working in a parachain or something that you're interested in, please reach out to me because I enjoy chatting to everyone. So thanks a lot for listening. Yeah. If you have questions, just chuck them in the chat for now. Oh, yeah, I'll put the Twitter in here. It's just at Polkadot. A special shout out to you for being here as the first person. It made me feel good. Thank you. Any other questions, potentially about Polkadot governance or about anything? Do you think to create a zeitgeist market for a bounty can help to improve? I'm not sure what you mean by a zeitgeist market for a bounty. But I do have an interesting kind of thing to talk about Zeitgeist. The Zeitgeist currently there's a lot of discussion going on about Zeitgeist because they have a problem with their Polkadot parachain, has the wrong para ID, so they're not producing blocks, and they tried to submit a governance proposal through Polkadot to fast track their unbricking, which was denied by the council, which kind of introduces a really interesting topic because the council, the technical committee would have blocked that yet. So the technical committee is only supposed to really work on emergencies. So does this fall into an emergency or not? When there's a human-made error has bricked their parachain, should the technical committee intervene? I personally am on the fence, probably leaning towards no, because I don't like the technical committee to have too much scope and range, and yeah, but that's a great kind of thing to look at. But to answer your original question, do you think to create a zeitgeist market for bounty can help improve? Potentially, I'm not too sure. Any other questions? Doesn't even have to be about governance. It could be about Australia, League of Legends, whatever. How can we use the Oak project? How can we use Oak for the project like DeFi on Parachain? Yeah, so you can use Oak to schedule future transactions on our chain and then execute them on another chain through the XCM bridge. At the moment, we only have the XCM bridge open with Shiden and Magada. We will have more Parachain XCM bridges open soon. So essentially, you will be able to create some form of auto compounding or recurring payment using our chain and then execute it on another Parachain. So that could be likely utilized in your project. Say if you wanted to put the rewards back into a liquidity pool, or split your staking rewards and send half of it from one wallet to another wallet or into a pool, or flip it into something else. Essentially any action that you find is going to be relevant, and you can use our chain to execute it. All right, well, looks like that's pretty much it. I'll put my email here one more time. Is there a place to find previous hackathon projects for inspiration / direction? That's a great question, actually. There should be. I'm not sure if any of the Angel Hack guys are around from the last Hackathon. Maybe potentially someone here. Oh, Zophie from Parity is probably the exact person to actually be asking. It looks like she has just joined. But there should be a information for previous hackathon projects. You could probably take a look and just search North American Polkadot Hackathon 2022 and see what pops up. I know there's a Medium post which kind of discusses a few of the winners. Yeah, there we go. I knew someone would have it. Yeah, so you can see past projects there. So as you'll see, there's a lot of variety of different projects, a lot of different tracks, and obviously the kind of requirements probably changes a little bit too, but there's always a lot of good projects. Like I said, I'm a big fan of the dashboards. I think they're always really good. I'm gonna put my email address here one more time. So if you think of a question in the future, feel free to send me an email, and I'm usually pretty quick at responding because I spend too much time on the computer, like I'm sure all you do as well. All right. Well, looks like I'm done. Yeah, if you'd like to learn more, please check out Oak Network. You can find us on Twitter, and we're also on YouTube, and our website is oak.tech. So yeah, if you like anything else, feel free to reach out to me. I'm always pretty active. And thanks a lot for taking the time to learn a little bit about governance and on-chain governance for Polkadot and Parachains. And I hope it was useful. Thanks a lot.